They don't. The grid can't take what's coming. Areas that are outlying, they just won't be able to get electricity to them. The power lines won't be able to, all these little sticks with wires on them, they're not going to be able to bury all that. They just don't have the resources. They don't have the time. They buried ours. I mean, we have hydroelectric power, which is pretty good. But other places don't have that. And then Cryon talked about a geothermal power that they can use for small villages and towns. They could put a well down and everybody could have power. And it would be cheap. Cheap and clean. They put a solution so that the water, they make a solution. So they add something to water to make a solution. So water boils at 100 degrees Celsius or 212. It'll bring the temperature down for the boiling so they won't have to go down as far. So they can add something to it and maybe it'll boil at 100 degrees. And it won't be toxic either. And they'll be able to generate power for the whole village, and it won't poison the ground, and it'll be probably a closed system, and they'll have power. The earth will never cool off, not in our lifetime, and they'll have continuous power, endless power, and all they need is a well. The magnetic invention, you'll be able to put one of those in your home, or maybe 3 homes will share it or something like that. I mean, you could put 1 or 2 of them in a hospital, and it'll power the hospital. You won't need to have power lines across the country for hundreds of miles. Those power lines cause fires. So they'll be able to discontinue all that. And then for our spirituality, you'll be able to meditate, do these new things. They're new to us. They're actually ancient. And we won't need to go to church and be told what to do. We'll be able to discover it on our own. We won't have to be controlled with false religion. It's going to be a completely different world. There will be a saltwater invention where you can run boats on salt water. Somehow they'll burn it or something. There will be a geothermal with a solution that brings down the boiling point so that you can have shallow wells in non-volcanic areas. So you'll be able to have these devices in areas where there's no volcanoes. And then you'll have that magnetic device that can be used in homes, and eventually they'll be able to put them in cars. So the cars will run on their own then. I mean, these people in these UFOs, that's what they use. You don't see them filling up with gas. They don't fill up with gas. These UFOs don't have to stop and get gas, and they don't use nuclear either. They have some kind of a free energy. It's a radio energy or something. It's some kind of free energy. And they're able to operate those crafts anywhere. That's what's going to allow interplanetary travel. Rockets, they're not going to use rockets to go to other planets. They're not going to use nuclear energy to go to other planets. They're going to use they're going to use what the aliens use. It's going to be something like what the aliens use. There's a free version of energy, and you can power your houses with it, and I think it'll eventually be something you can power a craft with. They got some kind of a power source that they can come from the Pleiades to here. get here in a day's time. They don't get here and they're 75 years older. They get here and maybe it's 8 or 10 hours that's passed by. It's like driving from Chicago or from Lima to my house. And I think a lot of that is traveling to some jump point or something like that out in space. So they got to get out somewhere. And then it's like instantaneous from there. And then they come to a jump point here. And some of them probably can do it instantaneously. But there's some kind of an energy source. Otherwise they wouldn't be able to get here. It would take them too long to get here. And they can't live here. I don't think they can live here because our gravity's different. It would be like if you were to suddenly be a different weight. You wouldn't be able to do it. You can't go to another planet and live because it would weigh a different amount. It would mess up your metabolism. It would probably eventually kill you. Even if they had the right air, the gravity would play havoc. You wouldn't be able to live very long because the gravity's different than your home planet, and so they got to go back home. If they have bodies, they'd have to go back home eventually. Either that or they'd have to bring that grid with them on their ship, and they'd have to live on their ship, and they could come out here for periods of time, and then they would have to go back to that ship. Otherwise they would lose their health, because our men, when they go to the moon, they can't live on the moon. They can't live in a spaceship. They lose their vitality. Well, after a certain amount of time, they can't live anymore because the gravity is too different. So they have to bring their grid with them, and we'd have to bring our grid with us. If we go to another planet, our ship would have to have that grid. We'd have to figure out how to install that grid, which I'm sure it can be done. So that way they're living in their home grid. And while they're visiting that planet, they can use that ship as their base. They could sleep on that, and then they could go on little outings to the planet. And then they'd come back to their ship after a certain amount of time. Because they can't permanently settle a planet. Because they wouldn't be able to, their bodies wouldn't be able to take it. They'd weigh too much or too little. And then the air would be too different, the magnetism would be different. I mean, there's a lot of factors. They just wouldn't be able to live long term. And they might be able to live for a week or a couple weeks or even a month, but they couldn't live there permanently. They would eventually die. And we would eventually die. If we went to settle on the moon, we would eventually die. Even if we had the right air, we would die eventually because the grid of the Earth isn't up there. We would be too light, too heavy. There's some kind of a factor that we gotta have to live. And it's not up on the moon, it's not on Mars, it's not on the other planets. Because they're just a little different than ours. And it's not compatible. There's no weight on the moon. It wouldn't weigh anything. So your body wouldn't run right. Your body is made to be on Earth. There wouldn't be the right weight. Your body systems wouldn't run quite right. And then of course on other planets they don't have the same atmosphere, so you'd have to go around with some kind of a breathing apparatus, unless you could find a planet that has the same air. But even if they had the same air, they